Okay. Should we start with some questions? Are there any in the audience that have a question? Please speak into the microphone, otherwise we can't hear you on the video. No questions?
Yeah, hello. One of the things that we get with conventional linear TV is the ability to integrate with emergency alerting and warning systems. This is something I work on around the world. So I see that as a challenge in this migration you're talking about in the next phase to IP. Do you have any thoughts or views on how those kind of considerations are going to be taken into account with the work that's currently in hand?
Yeah, I can answer the technical part. You might want to answer the regulation part. So when it comes to streaming, what you get is the ability to do a one-to-one personalization. An emergency alert is one kind of personalization that can be done. In some countries, there are regulations to say, okay, if I think Indonesia, for example, if a tsunami was to happen, you have to stop live broadcast and tell the population that they have to find shelter. So this is doable in streaming as well. You use technologies like manifest manipulation, and during the broadcast, you will basically stop putting the chunks of video that would be live and put your emergency alert instead. This is something that is deployed in a few places, but it comes down to what I would say regulation. It's for the country to say you need to put this in place. Otherwise, I don't think this is put in place by default. Right?
No. I won't say too much about it, but it's broadcast has never been within our emergency alert kind of policy in the UK. We use other systems. You may have had the mobile alert test recently. Right. But we could do it. But there are national resilience plans to ensure that we are in a very safe place in the future. But we're not. I don't think we're going to use television for that. But other markets are.
I think those mobile service alerts could be actually quite useful for teaching people how to use modern TVs.
How to watch the game, yeah.
Morning, thank you. That was a really interesting session. Just wondered, in terms of cybersecurity for internet-based streaming, what assessments have you made or you think need to be made in terms of the parity with linear or indeed terrestrial broadcast, which is in of itself self-contained and one step removed from that risk of cyber threat?
I can talk a little bit about what we've seen recently. So I talked about CDN, right? And I think everybody understands CDN, content delivery networks, typically a large number of caches deployed all over the world and operated by typically large American companies, the Akamai, the Fastly, CloudFront of this world. What we started to see, especially with broadcasters, is this idea that maybe I should not only rely on the Americans to deliver my content. We had this with the Norwegian broadcaster, NRK, not too long ago, that basically said, look, I'm going to buy some more CDN services because I need it to deliver my content across the networks. But I need something that will work in case of something bad happening on the global world. Let's say Norway tomorrow is cut off from the global internet. Could I still rely on a CDN like Akamai or like Fastly to deliver my content? Probably not. So they wanted to build their own CDN, their own delivery network, to be able to do that. So this is something we started to see more and more, this ability to work whatever the geopolitical landscape is. And I think going forward, we're probably going to see more and more this trend, right? This ability to say, right, I need to make sure that my content can get to its audience. And there's a strong link with the traditional terrestrial broadcast, because that's obviously very trusted and something that has been proven to be working really well. The question is can we do something similar on IP? For example, in the UK, what would be the right approach to deliver all the content to all the users and guaranteeing that we're not at the mercy of cyber security threats?
2 points actually. One clearly we've got to look at the overall change. So a few years back, the UK government introduced the Product Security and Telecommunication Infrastructure Act, which meant that we needed to make sure all IoT devices were secure by design. So the DTG set up a joint venture called SafeShark to provide compliance services to people wanting to sell products into the UK. And the National Centre for Cybersecurity's most important objective in that is to make sure televisions that are universally deployed attack platforms for in every home are secure by design. So we do a lot of work on that. Europe was slightly behind the game. They introduced it into the RED, Radio Equipment Directive, and now CRA will come with much more stringent requirements, and those requirements are in the process of just being finalised, and we're testing for that as well and monitoring for that as well. And it's a bit of a journey from a consumer electronics perspective, but we do understand that we'll get to the point that retailers and consumer electronics companies won't get insurance, cybersecurity insurance, unless they comply to the local legislation. So watch this space, but I think the in-home consumer electronics sector is going through quite a rapid journey. Of course, the rest of the chain needs to be resilient, and there's a lot of work going on by all parties to increase that resilience. And clearly there's a great deal of attention on resilience, national resilience, by our government to make sure that we are resilient as a country. So we'll have resilience embedded into our future, very much so. But if you know any manufacturers, or if you're buying from any manufacturers, you might want to give them a nudge and tell them that they should make sure that their products at least comply to the legislation.
Interesting. As you can see, we're already getting somewhere. We'll take one more, and then I'd like the panel to actually, because we've been spending quite a bit of time on our thoughts for this and the education of everybody. Go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you to the panel for 3 excellent presentations. A lot of food for thought there. I'm going to pick up on the first one about the broadband market in general. There was an article in the Telegraph yesterday saying how we didn't need this fibre stuff. We'd all be on fixed wireless access and direct-to-home internet.
Too early
satellite.
for that one.
I just wonder if you would like to comment on that and a little perspective on that, please.
Yeah,
the
sure.
role those two technologies might play alongside fibre.
So, I mean, we're going to get fibre to most homes, and it's the best solution by far. Satellite doesn't compare, fixed wireless doesn't compare, and it never will. I think the problem is with fixed wireless, if you look at what's happening in the US, there's been a lot of deployments there, and that's driven by the lack of fibre rollouts, essentially. Same with Starlink, that's been growing because of the same thing. Now, I think if you're looking at fixed wireless as a solution, you have to also consider, the spectrum that's available. So do we have millimetre wave in the right places to service those people? Do we have the densification of the network to be able to serve, all of these people that are not just streaming TV, but they're gaming, they're using it for their business and so on and so forth. So I'm not a massive proponent of fixed wireless, to be honest, because I've seen the last 20 years everything that's happened from WiMAX to where we are now, and it's been a disaster for anything that's not industry, essentially. So, and you also have 5G networks are becoming more and more capable. But I think, if you're going to rely on fixed wireless and satellite, it is going to be for the kind of the small unconnected parts of the country, and it will have a role to play for sure. It's just not ready. It's not ready. And if you look at the speeds that people are getting in the US at the moment, the network issues that they're having, the stability isn't there. And you need stability, I think, to deliver decent television. And I was mentioning yesterday, actually, on our kind of panel call that, I had bought, I want to say a Sky Glass TV a couple of years ago, and I was on the Virgin Media cable network, and my TV didn't work. I had a 1 gig connection. It was a business broadband connection, so it's supposed to have been, the best that they can offer. And it would freeze every day. Some days it wouldn't work at all. Switched to fibre. I haven't had an issue in 2 years. So, I mean, it kind of shows you, and that's on cable, that's a fixed network. And that's partly because of the way that cable delivers broadband speeds and bursts versus what you have with fibre optics. So there's issues there. There's issues in terms of spectrum, in terms of costs of rolling out the networks to support those people that aren't connected. And if you're going to rely on these networks to do all of the things that we do at home and all the devices that we support, I think it needs to be up to scratch, because it won't hold up with streaming and all the rest of it.
Just very briefly, so my work chairing the infrastructure working group for the media minister on the future of TV distribution. The various papers we've written have kind of set out that the majority of homes, based on the gigabit broadband commitments, the majority of homes will be watching using fibre, or be able to watch using fibre. But there will be those corner cases and those difficult to reach and those awkward cases. And so some of those will be using fixed wireless access, mobile, or LEO. So the good thing is we've got a selection of technologies to make sure that we don't leave anyone behind. We are very much based on most people are going to use fibre.
I mean, I think we mentioned earlier, but we haven't had a perfect DTT network in any case ever, and we actually have more people that are better connected to the internet than they ever have been to DTT. I mean, I've been in 6-7 different homes, the last 20 years, and I've never had a decent DTT connection. So it's not always. What I'm saying is that you can't guarantee it, even with what we have now. It's not perfect, and actually, the future looks like it could be a lot rosier with IP-based TV if we can get it right.
If we can get it right. I think that's the optimal word in some of that, if we can get it right.
Yeah.
Now we've got a chance to try and get it right. I mean, when we started looking at this, we started early with digital inclusion. How do we ensure digital inclusion? Because it's not just one thing helps all. We've already spoke about the networks. How do we get that to work? How do we get digital inclusion? Also, to your point, Richard, how do we make sure everybody can use their remote controls without getting anxious? I mean, I'm getting anxious with all the eyes looking at me right now. So think about it the other way.
Furtive. There's one of the elephants in the room actually, which is kind of being dealt with, are all the externalities, all the benefits of digital inclusion beyond television. So television's a great driver for digital inclusion, but actually, Starmer last week announcing the e-hospital stuff that they're going to roll out. The education drive that we needed during COVID, hopefully that will never happen again, but who knows, we could well have moments where we need to home educate. E-government, signs of active life and social services, etc. And I can go on. So there are huge benefits of digital inclusion, and we shouldn't put all the pressure on television to deliver that. But there are benefits to digital inclusion that go much further than TV. But if we look back, and it's a very different transition, but when we look back to what we did for the transition to digital television, digital broadcast, we made sure that most people got there on their own, because we had a highly competitive market, half the market watching pay, etc. We made sure, and we smuggled digital tuners and decoders into every TV. And so most of the market got there on their own, and then the ones that were left behind, we either terrified them into getting it the night before because we turned BBC Two off, I think it was the week before actually or something, but we suddenly had the kind of almost the 3-minute warning to them. And those that couldn't get there on their own, we had a help scheme and we got them there. And this is very different and it's more complicated than the systems are more complex, but the benefits are enormous. We don't know what the upside unintended consequences are of digital inclusion. there'll be things that we haven't even imagined today. And I think as a society, we can't afford the NHS as it is. We have to have a digital NHS. Education's not in great shape, and we can go on. So there is a kind of big society piece in this, which I think is really important. And as we go through the years ahead, I think we will begin to learn that there are wider benefits of this, and we will at the right moment, I'm sure, transition from broadcast, and we're working out what that moment will be. But there's a big prize at the end of this.
Definitely. If we look at this digital inclusion, I mean, Xavier, you were looking at the content delivery gaps we've got, which is also part of this inclusion. How does that affect us, in your opinion?
So I think there are different ways to look at it, right? Content delivery is important, right? Because we talked already a little bit about cybersecurity and getting influence. I'm always a bit nervous when we work with broadcasters and they tell us, oh, I'm just going to put my content on YouTube, or I'm going to use a Chinese CDN, a TikTok CDN, for example, ByteDance, to deliver my content. This is where it's like, is this really a good idea? So yeah, I think there's definitely an impact onto the people, and we need to think, okay, what does that mean at the end for the audience? As a user, what's going to be the impact if I get this service delivered via a platform or via a different CDN? Could there be influence by that platform or by that CDN at the end? That raises, I think, some interesting questions. But at the end of the day, what you want as a user is very simple. You want the TV to behave like a TV, so you zap, you get the channel, you don't buffer, you have the right quality on screen. And this is, I think, this set of expectation is interesting because we have learned that. We learned that the TV behaves this way. If you look at watching the same piece of content on the phone, you know that the experience on your phone is not going to work very well. It's likely to buffer a little bit. We're just talking about the networks, how bad the coverage is in this building to start, right? So if you want to watch BBC One on your phone, there's a good chance that the stream will take a little bit of time to start, and it might buffer halfway through, and you might give up because it's not the experience you want. So I think setting expectations with users is something important as well.
Sounds good. When we were talking about the 4 Ps. Everybody knows what the 4 Ps are. This is where you all nod and say yes. Product, price, place, and promotion. But this actually starts challenging all of this. These are what we've lived by for ages. But when I started looking at it, product becomes more platform experience and content. So we can't go back to product. It's a completely different world. Price is something completely different because it has to balance that flexibility versus the rising delivery costs. The place shifts from fixed infrastructure to dynamic EP, CDN ecosystems. And promotion, now it has to take in personalization and retention. How are we going to get this world to meet our 4 Ps that we used to have? You're welcome. Anyone have any thoughts on that? Because it's totally changing our perception of a product.
Yeah, and it's I bang on about kind of the principles of innovation as well every year to the RISE community, and there's kind of like a little list of secrets of innovation, and the product one, it's got to flipping work. It's got to work really well. Quite often it's usually successful products are based on technology that's been around a while. So we're super interested about time travel and everything else, of course we are, but actually the stuff that, my 86-year-old mum, I want to make sure, I don't really want to using cutting edge technology, I want to use using stuff that works and she can use. So the product's got to be right, it's got to work, and we've got to do that. The other thing is there's a kind of, I think there's a forcing factor here. The forcing factor is that whether we like it or not, a national broadcast technology serving homes that may be just 1.5 million and reducing from in the 2030s to 500,000 or something, or maybe even further south. We can't afford infrastructure that's going to cost hundreds of millions a year to operate. You just do the maths; it becomes very expensive per home. So there are forcing factors on the cost side, and there are lots of other elements of that. But there are also, huge forcing factors on the income side. And when I said that if you, and it's not entirely true, but I think it's a useful thought study that if we're going to put telly on the internet, we've got to play by internet rules. Not entirely, but what that does mean is back to Xavier's point over L ads and home shopping and we've got dynamic live pause ads at the moment and lots of things. Which incidentally, I think dynamic live pause is a really nice, subtle television-like experience, unlike overstimulated old people terrified by home screens. So we have to. The forcing factor is that we've got to address the costs, and running two systems, etc., is challenging and super expensive. We've also got to address the business opportunities, and we still want telly to look like TV, and we don't want overstimulated old people. That's terrifying. But what we do want is for our sector to be able to, in a very healthy way, embrace business models that ensure that we can continue to fund British content and great entertainment, and we're doing it. That's the we talk about this as if it's the future. It's kind of today. So I think we'll be okay, but we will be on our toes a bit as we go through it.
Yeah, maybe just to build on that, the price, right? The P for price. There's an interesting idea here, right? Because of course we want to include everybody, right? But TV being a valued service by all the population, right? Some people rely on TV to avoid loneliness, right? So there is, I think, a social value of TV. And this category of the population doesn't necessarily bring a lot of value, commercial value, to the broadcasters, right? This is not typically the category people want to advertise to, right? So we need to, I think, very consciously realize that there are two sets of value. If I want to do a lot of targeted advertising and shoppable ads and all that, I'm not going to do that with the people who stayed on the broadcast television, but I still need to give people who are on broadcast television an experience because of the social value of TV that is very different from the commercial value that an advertiser will have. I think those two sets of values, they don't align, right? So we're going to have to get into this thinking, that we somehow need to have both values, maintained, or if not increased in this transition, right? We can't, just focus on the commercial value at the expense of the social value of TV.
We talk about the valuable audience, the ones we want to mine for cash, and the valued audience, the ones that we want to make sure we don't leave behind. And we public policy will look after the valued, and I'd like to think that the sector will look after the valuable bit.
Yeah. Hopefully. Mo, this is something that other people have done. I mean, internationally, we're not the first doing this. What have you seen from there?
Yeah, so if you look at Europe, if we stick to Europe, you'll see that, generally speaking, it's only really the big five markets, France, Spain, UK, Italy, Germany, that have a decent size kind of DTT population and viewing on DTT. I mean, Germany kind of is a bit funny because it relies heavily on satellite, and they launched DTT very recently actually, which was strange because they were like 15 years behind everyone else. But the problems that you see now within the larger markets is that there's a lot of consolidation. There's not enough advertising money because the viewers aren't really there anymore as much as they used to be. If you look at the smaller markets, they don't really have much of a DTT population. So there's quite a few examples there, Belgium, Netherlands, where you get, a handful of broadcasters, barely, like just the main public broadcaster, essentially on the DTT network. It's very limited, and it's serving, 40, 50,000 people at most in a country of 10 million people. So we do have those instances where we're still kind of running a bit of DTT just to serve the valued kind of consumers, if you like. So, again, it kind of comes back to public policy, and it's the difference between a commercial broadcaster and a public broadcaster. Their interests are completely different, right?
definitely. I can see someone's grabbed a microphone. That's always frightening, Joe.
I do my best. Richard, you said we've got to play by the internet rules. I'm one of the old gits of the internet, and I think I have to say we need to be really careful about that, because let's go back, the whole dot-com boom and crash, and the strongest business model on the internet at the moment looks like hacking. So we need to be really careful about this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I said I was being a little bit flippant, saying we've got to play entirely by the internet rules. But we do need to be able to compete against internet business models, and we do need to be able to provide the richness of services from traditional television operators if we're to compete against the kind of YouTubes and others of the world. So we do need to embrace those rules, but we've somehow got to do it with television values, and we can't lose our moral compass along the way, and we've got to protect audiences as we go, and a lot of time and energy and thought is going into that at the moment. But it's happening anyway. The audiences are moving anyway, so we need to look after them as we go.
When you look at the international political leadership, I'm not sure moral compass means a lot anymore.
No, but it does.
Do you want that on video?
That's a really, really important point, because it does for media. We still have our moral compass. We still have a regulator and a government department that supports that, and we still have broadcasters that support that. And no matter I don't know how long this current government's going to be in power. Should we take bets? Let's not take bets. But actually, no matter what, as we go through the implementation of the media bill, as legislation is brought forward on the future of television distribution, as we look at the outcome of Ofcom's call for evidence of what we do with advertising, etc., charter renewal, as all of that comes through, if the one legacy from a media perspective that this government can leave us with, whether they're in to the end of this current term or another 2 terms, whatever happens, if they can make sure that we're in a safe place with media, that's probably the best we can hope for as a sector for the future of television. That won't fix politics, but it might call it out.
And I think there
are 2 possibly distinct issues here. There is, as you say, the future of television, but there's also the future of the internet, the future of broadband access to the internet. And they kind of overlay. They're at a moment where we are kind of overlaying them, but they are separate. And I think from my side, which is very much sort of internet pipes, that's kind of what I do, having that demand driver of television on the network is hugely important. Finally, it's something that people really want. And I think, to what Xavier was saying, the personalisation of that means that actually, if you get it right, you bring together the valued and the valuable, because the poor old pensioners ain't necessarily quite so poor these days. So there's value in the valued as well. There's an awful lot. Like you say, if we get it right, we're okay. If we get it wrong, we're in real difficulty.
Yeah, and they're all going to be using e-hospitals anyway, so it's kind of
or
they're going to have to. So
we can't afford
to
have people not on the internet. So the more that we can do to smuggle the internet into their homes for the things they want, brilliant, because they're going to need it at some point.
Mo, can I just take Mo?
Yeah,
you also
sure.
have a comment for this first.
Yeah, no, I just think it's interesting what's happening in the US in terms of politics and media. You look at Ellison and his acquisition of every single media outlet that doesn't, essentially blurt out their political views on
it's good that you find it interesting, because the rest of the world finds it hilarious.
No, well, it's scary. I mean, let's be realistic. It is scary when you see that kind of influence, and we have it here in Europe. Let's not deny that. You look at Canal Plus, you look at CGM, and their acquisition of Altice Media. You look at Mediaset and what they're doing. I mean, you know, there's no shortage of that. But I think, you know, regulation, as you say, public services are there for that purpose. You know, public broadcasting, radio, video, TV, all of that stuff came from, you know, revolutions and broadcast and towers, and, you know, what did they, the governments that fell in the East fell, you know, when the radio towers were taken over, essentially, right? So I mean, there is that side to things. I think, you know, regulation helps to protect us, hopefully, and it is going to be effective enough in that space. But yeah, I mean, I just wanted to bring that up because I think we're already in a bit of trouble. But I think ultimately we don't have a choice, and I think the whole kind of topic around digital exclusion and being able to just zero in on that, and there's a lot of good work going on there in terms of connecting people. So I think I really am positive. I think it will get there, and I think we're in a good place at the moment because we're looking ahead and maybe 10 years ahead, you know, in terms of, you know, when DTT might be feasibly switched off potentially, maybe a bit sooner. But
Richard, you had a comment, and then we've got Ian.
Just very, very quickly, I don't think there's any accident that Ian Murphy, the new media minister, has 1 foot in DCMS and 1 foot in the Department of Science and Technology, DSAT. That'll do. There's another point.
Mine is more of a comment. I think it's probably important for us all to understand that this is not the first service moving to IP based. We already have a process in place happening on telephony, which will complete in January 2027, which means that if you wish to have a home phone, you have to have a broadband connection of some sort, whether that's fixed or wireless. There is some legacy fallback solutions for only some small number of consumers. It's an important comment to make because at the end of the day, I think the success for what we want to do here has to be measured by the awareness of the consumer. My mother-in-law, she's 88. She has no idea that her telephone has been working off the internet for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And that's what the mark of success is. Of course, television is much more complex. That's what we've got to handle differently.
Okay. We're going to start closing up. We only had an hour and a half. We should have had 3. But Xavier, can you take your sort of feedback from this and your last points? What do you think is important?
For me, it's the experience, right? Building on what Ian was just saying, a phone call is a phone call, right? You know, you expect the phone to give you a tone, and you know, you dial your number, and this is what television should feel like once we move to IP. It should be transparent, it should be easy, it should be low latency, fast channel change, no rebuffering, whichever way we do it. It should be targeted, because I think this is opening, you know, a set of, you know, interesting opportunities behind. Yeah, and I will leave it here, I think.
Richard?
It's about the audience, it's about the viewer, and even though we tie ourselves up in knots and complexity with technology, and we'll do all that. We're great at that in the UK. We'll sort that out, and we're great at committees. But we love a committee. But actually, keep your eye on the viewer, and we know where younger viewers are going, and we know where the older viewers are, and there's us right in the middle. But let's make sure that we look after all of those viewers.
Definitely. Mo?
Yeah, for me, it's again going to the audience, but kind of looking at the content sources. You know, I think right now where we are, it's not going to get any worse. We already have too many content sources, whether it's the type of content, fast, you know, SVOD, linear, whatever. And we have, you know, too many services, too many prominent services even. But it's kind of going back to the old kind of, you know, linear way of things. We had a lot of channels, maybe too many channels on pay TV at some point, and that's been reducing. So I think ultimately it's how you bring all of these sources together and how you search and discover content. And I think that comes down to kind of, you know, audience personalization. AI voice search is going to be critical in bringing all of this together, because we've been playing around with UIs for, you know, a good 10, 15 years at least, and no one's got it right. And you have all this fragmentation that's been driven by the different devices. So we're going back to kind of who controls what's going on. Is it Roku, or is it Samsung, or LG, or Sky? So you have all of these different sources of content, all these different platforms, all of the different devices. And I think the challenge is going to be kind of, having something that works across all of these for everyone. And I think that's what it's going to take to get it to work ultimately, is bringing all of these sources, making them discoverable in the right way. And it goes back to kind of being content-led rather than being, product-led.
Product-led,
Yeah.
Exactly. Xavier, Richard, Mo, thank you very much for starting the first panel, and I hope you're all now informed. Let's take it into the next panels.